The way you want to live your life is mastered by your own self.
The metaphysical hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation. I'm Hakeem Alibokus Alexander, and I'm thinking that I'm going to consolidate all my podcasts into one show instead of having 9 of them. I eliminated one. I had 10. This one here is an ongoing thought that I've been developing, and really this is the summary of it. I'm going to give that right away at the beginning. So you can hear this and you can go away. This is the thesis. And if you think that it's going to be BS, you don't want to listen anymore, then that's great. Then you can save yourself some time. So the thesis here is basically that, one, for the most part, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And that whether we are experiencing things in our lives that we desire and are good for us, or if we're experiencing things in our lives that we don't desire and are bad for us, it is in large part because of self-hypnosis. And of course, that doesn't mean that we should blame ourselves and beat ourselves up and say that, things like, oh, it's all my fault. We could simply reframe that and say that it's our responsibility. But the problem is that a lot of us don't know that this is true. So this song that's playing in the background, Flora Elizabeth Carrasco, she says, the way you want to live your life is mastered by your own self. And I say that all knowledge and all power is in all places at all times. So this is the metaphysical and the hypnosis together. And why do I say it's the metaphysical hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation? Because these are simply different ways that people have described the same thing over the human experience. And we can look at it from these different levels. So we can simply look at it from this subset of psychology called hypnosis and say that, yes, I'm responsible for choosing the information that I allow to impress itself upon my mind, my brain, and how I behave accordingly from that information that I receive. And of course, because we're going to behave, we're going to respond, we're going to do things according to what we learn, what we know, what we experience. And everything that we experience and that we bring into our experience, different people are going to respond to in just as many ways as there are people, for the most part, we could say. However, the flip side of that is that, unfortunately, when it comes to what could be called demonic infestation, and I'm just saying that, but I'm going to talk about it in those terms. Unfortunately, when it comes to the things that are not good for us, many people, maybe even you, tend to follow along with the crowd. Because those things that are normal, which is mathematically means statistically most frequent, the thing that just happens to the largest number of people happen to be doing, in a lot of circumstance and situation is not the best. So just because something is normal, it does not mean that it's good or bad inherently. It just so happens that a lot of things that are normal, that are common, are mediocre at best, but detrimental instead. And that's the issue here. So again, let's see. This is first 5 minutes, and I'll just summarize it again. That basically I'm saying that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. We're responsible for the things that we allow to hypnotize us by how we filter our experiences. And because of that, it's going to direct our behavior and create the experiences of our lives. Essentially, I'm saying that we're responsible for our experience of reality and the things that happen. So now you can walk away. That's it. That's what I'm saying. But I'm going to start to now get creative with it and talk about it a little bit more from another perspective, metaphysically, that also, because it goes beyond the physical, it's going to touch on areas, of course, because I'm talking about angels and demons. It's going to touch on things that people might find familiar from their spiritual practices or religions. And so there's going to be those things there. I am not a religious person. I have submitted a thesis for a PhD in metaphysical sciences from the University of Metaphysical Sciences. I have a degree in clinical hypnosis from America's first nationally accredited College of Hypnosis, the Hypnosis Motivation Institute in Tarzana, California. You can find them at hypnosis.edu. So there's a couple of my academic studies and qualifications from how I'm approaching this, and then also from my experience, because I did a lot of research into demons and demonology, mostly because they were being popularized so much in movies. So, for example, the first one that's coming to my mind right now is a movie with Denzel Washington called Fallen, where the antagonist of that movie was the demon Azazel, and Azazel was being passed on, I think, if I remember correctly, through human touch or proximity. It was passing from person to person, which is a lot like this hypnosis idea, which now also through free association is reminding me of a movie, The Ghost of Mars, and where these adventurers, they went to Mars. I think Ice Cube was one of the actors in it. And I don't know who other, I think Natasha Henstridge, I'm not sure who was in it, but the Ghost of Mars, this entity, this other being was passing through people. It was like a red mist, and it was going from person to person and causing them to be crazy, right? And so then some other movies, of course, the most famous one is, well, one of the most famous ones I think is The Exorcist, and that was the demon Pazuzu. And then you have the Nun movies, for which is in the Annabelle universe, and that movie, that demon was called Valak in that movie, V-A-L-A-K, but I learned about it from Ariana Osborne's demon tarot cards as Volak, V-O-L-A-C, which he got them from the Infernal Dictionary and from Colin de Plancy and from these ancient grimoires, and made a card set out of it. And then also there was Paimon, King Paimon from the movie Hereditary, which was a really spooky one. It was really, really interesting. And so on and on and on through popular media, you have all of these depictions of these demons. And so this is one of the ways that captivated my interest in them, and to study them even more and write about them, in addition to a lot of experiences that I had growing up, and how I've seen things that are very interesting, but then over the years, as also the things that I learned about how the demons or the different entities changed form, but then sometimes they were already different. It's very interesting. And what I'm talking about here is that how early on in life, a lot of the the demons and things like that, they were aliens. So I had experiences with extraterrestrials, both good and bad, mostly what people would be consider bad ones. One was at the very best neutral. I don't know what her intention was, but so I'm gonna have a little fun here explaining this, but it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting idea that I'm exploring here, and right now I'm calling it the metaphysical hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation. So the thing is here, what a lot of us are experiencing, and I'm gonna now go in from one of the concepts that I've been developing for many years since I graduated from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. I started a website, hypnoathletics.com. Actually, I started as a subdomain. I've still never really officially used hypnoathletics.com. Right now, it just points to EYM.hypnoathletics.com, which the EYM stands for Exercising Your Mind. And then the very second website that I had was called Exercising Your Mind in 2007. But this idea of hypnoathletics is exercising your mind towards universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense. And so this all ties in because one of the things that I was already doing was working as a personal fitness trainer. Before that, I had been practicing and doing some amateur competition in martial arts. And then I've had experiences with people in my family and other people seeing how their physical bodies were affected by their daily habits of action and their nutrition and all kinds of other things like that, and saw a lot from experience that I really wasn't necessarily able to explain until I became a fitness trainer. And then I learned more about hypnosis and learned how a lot of times this is because of how we're perceiving things, the things that we filter out, the things we don't filter out, the things that we do let in, but then we act on it in different ways. Just like how, for example, somebody could be abused and then they go ahead and continue that abuse, or they live a life that completely avoids or even goes to the point of defending other people against it, right? So the same kind of thing can happen to different people and they respond differently, just in the same way how different people respond to different viruses. Some people might get sick from it while others may not have any symptoms at all, while some people might have it in their body but it won't manifest any symptoms. Their body will just be fighting it, so on and so forth. There's just varying different levels at which we experience the same kind of stimulus, this stimulation, same kind of input from the outside. And there's also some things that I'm going to touch upon. There's a very important idea called a tulpa, spelled T-U-L-P-A, which I understand from a Tibetan perspective, which very simply can be summed up as matter made from mind, or manifestations created from thought, which also kind of touches on some of the other New Age woo-woo stuff from like the book and the video series The Secret, right? Thoughts become things, we become what we think about. So a lot of these things are interconnected, but I'm talking about it in a very specific way here because one thing that it's somewhat similar to, but not the same, because I actually really didn't make it through the book because a lot of it was convoluted, and it really, sometimes when things don't really resonate with me, I stop reading them, but I keep them in my library. So I have this book called Remarkable Healings by a physician, a medical doctor, and a psychiatrist named Shakuntala Modi, I don't know how to pronounce her name. And in the book, she used hypnosis. And in her sessions, many of her patients reported basically demonic infestation as being the cause of much of their maladies. So a lot of their issues that they were dealing with, whether it was physical or mental illness. Also, this may come into play a completely different approach, but also a medical doctor and a psychiatrist who used hypnosis, who largely influenced the Capucinian hypnosis of the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where I graduated from, is Milton H. Erickson, who was responsible for having hypnosis accepted into the American Medical Association and the American Dental Association in 1958. He also used hypnosis to treat physical and mental ailments with his patients. He also developed a technique to help himself learn how to walk again by watching the babies in his family members learn how to walk after he was stricken with polio and the post-poliomyelitis that comes with that. And he was also the influence for another subsection of hypnosis called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, not to be mistaken for the machine learning process of natural language processing in the artificial intelligence industry. But that was, so there's a couple of things that I may be touching on there. And then, of course, like I said, his work, as I see it, from my opinion and from what we studied at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, I believe that his Ericksonian hypnosis was very influential on Capucinian hypnosis, which the founder of Capucinian hypnosis and the Hypnosis Motivation Institute is Dr. John G. Kappas. And he has a really excellent book, The Professional Hypnotism Manual, which I used 20 days after I enrolled in the school and had a really incredible experience with the first person I ever hypnotized outside of the practicums that we were doing in the school, because every day we were doing these practicums where we'd be hypnotized and we'd be hypnotizing and practicing on people, going through all of the different hypnotic scripts and the pattern and the inductions. And so I am somebody who has experience with it very early on that gave me a lot of confidence with working with it. And then also in my clinical residency, I worked on a metaphysical subject because I happened to run into these young ladies at Borders bookstore, which is no longer around, on Sunset Boulevard. I think there's like a drugstore there now, which is a pattern. A lot of the bookstores that Borders that closed became like CVS or something like that. So instead of educate, medicate, which I found fascinating. But so I ran into these young ladies, and they both wanted to do what's known as past life regression hypnosis when they found out that I was doing my clinical residency. And so that was a metaphysical experience that I had also in the early days, right around the end of when I was doing my 501 clinical residency. So I had some very interesting and powerful experiences with it, and then came across all of this other work, like I said, from Shakuntala Modi, and then, an integral part of our studies being Milton Erickson. And so and then very shortly after that, I found out about the University of Metaphysical Sciences, and then in 2008 I enrolled in their program, and only a couple of years ago got the bachelor's degree, then the master's, and then, like I said, I submitted the thesis for the PhD, which actually went off on talking about metaphysics and the philosophy of cosmology, which is basically another branch of astrophysics and studying space and space travel and exploration and all that stuff like that. So now, up to the present here, what I'm looking at is the metaphysical of hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation. And I chose that term to use as a title, and also to help keep me centered on this idea. One, because divination and infestation have somewhat of a rhyming effect to it, a rhyming to it, right? A rhyme to it. So that helps me to remember it. It keeps it catchy. And like I said, it's going to help keep my thoughts surrounding this subject, because I do have a tendency to get into like a lot of free association and wander off of my thoughts, but I want to keep it centered on this. And then also because early on in the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, there was a lot of influence from some of the other instructors too that did a lot of metaphysical things. I mean, we had Reiki classes there. One of the teachers was very much into past life regression. We have somebody who was doing guided imagery and was really getting metaphysical with that. And then, of course, like I said, I worked with past life regression in the 501 during the clinical residency. And also, I had also read some other books by other people who were doing past life. I forget what the name of the author is now. Maybe it'll come to me later, but it's not so much important. But then also one of the things that I did was I found early on a book about numerology and really heavily got into numerology early on in around 2005. And so, wow, it's 2025 now, so it's 20 years ago. So it's coming up on my 20-year anniversary of being a numerologist, and I'm still in the beginning amateur phase of it, even though now I've gone on and created my own numerology system and also incorporate hypnosis and the metaphysical hypnosis of it, and how all of these things really tie together. In my opinion, metaphysics, hypnosis actually, from my expert opinion, can be used as a framework to discuss and explain and describe many of the experiences that we have in life in general. And so that's the position that I come from. A saying that somebody could use is, as you may have heard this before, that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I'm running with that, in that as a hypnotist, everything looks like some kind of form of hypnosis. But when really it's just that I can speak about it from the language of hypnosis. And now also having the education in metaphysics, I'm speaking about it from the language of metaphysics, and I'm calling it metaphysical hypnosis because they are very similar to me. And also I love to play with words, and I think that I'm clever sometimes. And so one of the things, so the school that I went to, again, is abbreviated as HMI, right? The initials, Hypnosis Motivation Institute. And me, because let's just say HMI is the Jedi, I like to look at things and be like, I'm going to go against, even though I'm not against them. So I flipped it around the opposite, IMH. So instead of, they have Hypnosis Motivation Institute, I have the Institute of Metaphysical Hypnosis. And I just think, so mine is IMH, what I've been building for all these years. I didn't think I was going to call it that before. It only probably came to me last year in 2024, but I've been building it for a long time through the iterations, hypnoathletics, exercising your mind, and I have physio meditation and dream action yoga, and my martial arts system Capoeira, that sounds like capoeira, and on, and then UniquilibriuM, a combination of the words unique and equilibrium, and then that iteration of the Institute of Metaphysical Hypnosis, right? So, but again, I have the understanding and the experience that a lot of things can be described and discussed through this framework of hypnosis. And it can be separated from metaphysics and specifically talked about as a subset of psychology, or a very special part of psychology called hypnosis, clinical hypnosis. Even as a lay hypnotist, somebody who does not have a degree in psychology or psychiatry or a medical degree, right? So I practice as a lay hypnotist. My scope of practice being vocational and avocational motivation and self-improvement. And then now also being an ordained minister after having obtained my master's degree from the University of Metaphysical Sciences, which is supported and founded by the Wisdom of the Heart Church, right? I can also put it from the perspective of spiritual counseling. So I have this combination of and these different approaches of how I'm able to look at these things. And so this is where this idea of metaphysical hypnosis comes from, and the idea of the metaphysical hypnosis of angelic, divination, and demonic infestation, because I've been practicing divination tools like numerology, right? And then more recently, and that's been 20 years ago, as I mentioned earlier, since 2005. And then more recently, I think around 2022 or 2023, I found a book it was actually, I picked it up at a Goodwill or something like that. It was called the Angel Numbers, and it's numerology, but going instead of what normally would be or usually used in numerology from 1 to 9, it goes up to 99. Actually, it goes up to 999. So that's another interesting aspect. So on, and it talks about the angel numbers, and then I've looked at other numerology books. But the first numerology book that I found in 2005, which is very interesting, it's called Numerology for Beginners by Jerry Bauer, and it's an interesting take. And then, of course, so it's these ideas from angelology, demonology, divination tools, and all these things come together with my understanding of hypnosis. And so this is the approach that I'm looking at it from. And then, as I said in the beginning, the thesis of this is simply that we could look at, for example, the bad things that happen in our lives as demonic infestation, and the good things that happen in our lives as angelic divination. However, the thing here is about personal responsibility, and that a large part of it has to do with what we're allowing in because of our experiences. And I talked a little bit about this on a video. I actually put it on my TikTok. It's on YouTube. And it talks about how you can hypnotize AI and social media and yourself to achieve your optimum fitness, health, and wellness. And again, all of this stuff is tied together. There's really not a separation. It's just a different way of looking at it. So, with all that being said, the metaphysical hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation can be understood from the black and white, the good and bad, God and the devil, angels and demons. And that really is the essence of it right there. So what I'm going to do is leave this as a part 1, because it'll come up to 30 minutes, and I think that's a long enough form for now to make a part 1. And I've planted the seed of that and given something to think about. And then I'll come back and record the part 2 and go into this a little bit further. And that's where it's going to get a little crazy. And this is where it's going to actually rub some people in a certain kind of way. It's actually going to act in a way like an exorcism, because a lot of your demons aren't going to want to hear what I'm saying. And this is one of the things that happens here. This is why I look at it like a demonic infestation a lot of times. And I'm going to look at it from that sensationalist perspective, and also explain how from what I'm seeing, a lot of religions got it wrong, and maybe even were put in place to disguise the real demonic infestation. I'm not sure, I don't recall if I said this in the beginning, but this is going to be a primary part of this thesis, which is that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world it doesn't exist, and the greatest trick that a hypnotist ever pulled was convincing the world that they can't be hypnotized. The idea is that if you're not ready for something like a sucker punch, it will knock you out even more. So this is part 1 of the metaphysical hypnosis of angelic divination and demonic infestation. I'm Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander.